sometimes I have a pastor friend who says, let's take a minute to get from getting here to being here. So it may have only been a walk across the room, but my hunch is that in our minds we have traveled a long way since we last met. A lot has happened in our world, a lot has happened in our country, a lot has happened in your communities. And we thought rather than doing just a heavy duty check in on what all that means, we might just be quiet for about 2 minutes, just to hold this silence, to try to let go of all that has come about today, all that will come about when we get off this call, and just to allow ourselves to hold some compassion for ourselves and for one another for the next couple of minutes. So feel free to do this with your eyes closed or with your eyes open, looking at the people on the screen, but just invite you into Christ's compassion for the next couple of minutes. Oh man, you're muted, Tom.
Oh dear. Thank you, Steve. Some of you know that there's such a great treasure of human beings and spirit beings here on the call today. And if you look across this beautiful collection of lives and stories and faces, you would know all we need is here, right here in this gathering. It's really beautiful. So I invite you to stay in that spirit of just a peaceful place, a quiet place. And I'd like I would invite two of you to volunteer to be spirit trackers for us. Some of you know what that is, and you're ready to volunteer on the spot. Let me just take a second to say, during our conversation today for the next hour, we would love it if you would notice how the spirit shows up for you personally, even within your own soul as you intersect with this conversation. Or at a second level is in the conversations that we have between you and others or between one person and another. Generally speaking, how is the life of the spirit showing up between us? And then thirdly, in the big picture from 20,000-foot view, how is spirit affirming the conversation that we're having today and how that ties into the rest of the conversations in your life or in our church at large? So that's what we're looking for. It doesn't need to be a transcript of conversation. It could just be 2 or 3 points that you name in about 60 seconds. And there's no perfect way of doing it. And this is not a gathering of expert spirit trackers. So if you've never done this before, feel free to volunteer. And we'd love to have you step forward and be our spirit tracker. So just wave at me if you're interested. See if I can catch the Teresa, thank you. Anyone else would join Teresa? And I'm going to move across to the other screen. Make sure I'm not missing anyone. If I don't name you, just keep waving until I get you. Ready? Who else will join Teresa? Teresa, who do you choose to join you?
Oh my.
I know, go ahead. It's your prerogative since you volunteered first.
Uh, Dana Cleaver Bartholomew.
Oh, Dina, it's your lucky day. You get to work with
Sorry.
Teresa.
Would that be okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. So Dina and Teresa, we're eager to hear how you notice the Spirit showing up in our conversation today. I said a moment ago when we first started that the focus of our conversation today is what we've been learning by hosting these regional gatherings all across the country over the last few years. And in our own self-assessment, in our own work together, we've noticed that there is momentum building. And so it feels important to have sort of an open public conversation about where this is taking us, what we're observing, what we're wondering, questions we can't answer yet, all of that in there. So I'd like to post a check-in question with you that harks back a little bit to what Steve invited us into, but it's also been the theme of this last gathering. And the question is, it's in the chat, how are you experiencing a need for interdependence these days? And I'm going to pause there and ask that Steve and Katie would unmute and unpack a little bit what we mean by interdependence, because I thought I knew what interdependence meant, but I think we're taking it to a whole new place. Steve, Katie?
You want to go first, Steve?
I will defer to you first, Katie, please.
Oh, I think I'll name just one component of this for me. In our church planting work, I think that we find more and more, it may feel obvious, but that new church communities, new communities of faith, can't go it heroically alone. I think we find that with many of the stories coming out about leaders who try to do that and end up getting themselves and their communities in trouble. I see it in the Episcopal Church with communities that feel alone, maybe sometimes even when they aren't, and really begin to realize, oh, wow, we need to be part of a wider church ecosystem, a healthy, wider church ecosystem, in order to live our best life and thrive in the sunshine and the nutrients that the larger shade plants and those entities that can cover us with prayers and other kinds of resources can offer. So that's a piece of it for me, interdependence within the church system.
Thanks, Katie. So Amy McCreath borrowed some words from, and I'm drawing a blank on his name all of a sudden, the guy who wrote a lot about nature. All we need is here. There's the song that we've all sung and learned. And I do believe all we need is here. And I think we're being invited to expand our notion of what here is. Is here just what's within the walls of our church? Is here what's within our community, our neighborhood? How are we recognizing that there are so many gifts that are waiting for us outside the doors of the familiar? And so how do we begin to be a little more vulnerable, to open ourselves up, to admit our need, and to receive some of those gifts that are waiting for us, not just be the ones who think that we have the mandate to share the gifts, but that we are also humble enough and brave enough to say, I need you. I need some things. I need some help. So that's what interdependence means for me.
Love it. Wendell Berry, that's good.
There you go.
That's right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Carl.
Carl. So the question is, how are you experiencing a need for interdependence these days? And it's an invitation for you to either respond in the chat or respond briefly by unmuting, speaking into this center of this space, if you can imagine a center here. And the focus is on how are you feeling a need for interdependence? And each of us is going to have a very different, there's no right answer here, but we're inviting you to check in with us by addressing that question. Try and limit your answer to about 30 to 60 seconds, and let's make sure we give everybody a chance to speak first. So feel free, either chat, raise your hand, or unmute and speak right up. It's up to you.
This is Uli. I jump in. I just woke in the church from a meeting, and then the building manager is telling me about a few homeless who have invaded a property that we have, and they are trying to spend the night because it's cold. And then they have been there, and we have been calling police on them. And I just said that it's cold. We need to find a plan and how to, we cannot kick them out like that, but at the same time, it's some insurance issues as well. And I feel like how I need the property manager to reach out to them so that we can have a meeting. At the same time, I need to reach out to the precinct within the community. At the same time, I need to talk to the chancellor about it. What is the legal ramification? How can we go about it? So I need.
Charlie, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I just watched Jesus Revolution the other night, and they struggled with the same sort of thing in this movie. Remarkable movie. I recommend it to you. And I invite you to keep your eye on the chat as well, as some of us are choosing to answer there. Who's next? Go ahead, Brian.
I just want to say that on Wednesday, this past Wednesday morning, the first thing that I did, it was already on my calendar, was this ecumenical and actually interfaith clergy group that's in my area. We had our monthly coffee meeting, and the timing couldn't have been better, of course, with it being the morning after the election. And it was an amazing thing because it was a space not to like strategize or anything like that, but just all of us to sort of collectively admit that we have no idea what we're supposed to be doing right now, and to be able to name that, and then not to come away with it with like, all right, here's step A, B, and C about what we're going to do to like, you know, secure the future, but just that, okay, we're here, and we see each other, and we recognize the need and how much we're going to continue to need each other, and leave it at that. And that was incredibly powerful, and I think it it got me through the rest of the week. So I don't know what I can say.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Catherine, please.
The interdependence part for me, actually, this group is a part of that. Because being in the Diocese of Alaska, where we often feel isolated and away and alone, and we're breaking new ground, I feel like are breaking new ground up here. We're bringing Genesis 2 in, and we're starting people really in this conversation about interdependence and relying on each other and being open and transparent. But there is nothing that brings me more joy than to gather with a group of colleagues who are having the same conversations and are open and honest and transparent and sharing vulnerabilities. Because for a long time, I've been a priest for over 20 years now, and for a long time, that has not been the case. And so this group is, for me, a part of that interdependence.
Thank you, Catherine.
In Salem, Mass, I feel as though we were a lot like a little tiny candle with this gentle flame that was so easily extinguishable when we were doing some of the initiatives that we've started to do post-COVID. And it's only in the power of connection amongst the people that we didn't realize we were so connected with, or that were interested in the same things we are. But it is in that power of connection that this becomes this wicked brighter light that has power and can actually make things happen. It's transformational. So I'm specifically thinking about our green energy things that we, as individuals, as an individual parish, we had these dreams of doing something, but now we're starting to achieve it because we've connected with other people and realized that we can't do this alone. And we have feared rejection and everything, but it actually was quite the opposite. So it's really powerful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. Kristen, wherever you are, it looks really cold. I hope you feel free to unmute and speak up and make it worth it for you.
Oh, it's not that cold, but it's chilly.
Yeah.
I do look like I'm turning red, but it's not that bad.
That was great. Thank you for being here. Dear Lord, this is beautiful. This is amazing. Your responses in the chat. Thank you for each of you, to each of you who have responded in here. And I hope that you'll take some time to look this over. Anyone else want to respond to this check-in question? Audra, I would cancel the rest of my afternoon and come walk with you if I could. Eric, please go ahead.
Saints, good morning from San Francisco, where it is not quite as chilly. But we had the rain, so thank you. You know, I've shifted to diocesan staff again, and I want to just pose this to the Saints, if I may, Tom, Katie, and Stephen.
Right now.
We romanticize heroic church planting, and as a church, emphasize that. One priest, one town, one church, sort of like Texas Rangers, right? One riot, one ranger, problem solved. How can we as church staff members support you in your work that it feels helpful and not oppressive, or I'll throw it out there, by reaching out for help, you're not admitting failure or inability to do the job?
Beautiful.
So how does our help feel like it's help and not saying something else?
That's great. Eric, let's hold that question out as a space for us to.
Thank you. I recognize that's probably a
into.
good one, but I want to see how it feels. I mean, be on the flip side now instead of being that parish life. How are we helpful?
Thank you. It's beautiful. Anyone else want to offer? Give you another moment here.
I'll go ahead.
Please.
Yes, we're digging into ABCD work, asset-based community development, and the answers again and again, I remember, are not even within what we think of as the existing church. They're in the community at large. And so there's that. And also because of the families that we have with young children, I see an intergenerational connection between our existing congregations. And these are ministries. We need one another. Some of the more established ones to be with our young ones. So, and
beautiful.
Yeah.
That mingling between generations, but also those familiar and those who are new. Yeah. Eesh, that's lovely, Teresa. Thank you. I'm putting some questions in the chat here, and our intention is to offer some space to respond for those who were there a week and a half ago in Boston, but any of these questions can also work for those of you that were not there. We're just taking some time during today's session to talk openly about where we've come from. We met in Birmingham a couple of years ago, and we did a little fun competition around the question, what is the theme for the work that we're called to do together? And what do we call ourselves? And this lovely woman from California, Jane, gave us practicing possibilities. And we've stayed with that theme, although it has continued to morph and evolve and stretch us. And so in the spirit of that, we'd like to practice some possibilities with you by naming 6 questions. And I've put them in the chat. You might need to widen that column a little bit to be able to see them all in one window. But what we'd love is those of you who were there a week and a half ago, if you'd sort of model your own responses to these questions. And here's how we propose you do it. Choose a question and tell us which one you've chosen and offer your response to it in a way that invites the rest of us, even those who were not there, to reflect on how this is true or what is becoming true in our own lives. Does that make sense? Steve, did I explain that in the way that we intended?
Yeah, I think so. We just don't want this to be an exclusive conversation, so we want to make sure that we are touching base on the commonalities to us all as we answer.
So Steve, for those who don't have the access to the chat, would you mind back and forth with me on these? I'll start with the first one. We'll just read them aloud.
Okay.
The first question is, what is a new possibility that you saw during our gathering?
The second one is, what do we need to carry forward into our next gatherings? And this might be something that you actually pick up on at the end of our conversation as you listen in. Maybe you weren't there, but you're catching a thread, and we'd love to hear your perceptions on that.
We try to follow the thread of where we stopped. The question is now for us, well, what's next?
And then Dr. Julie Lytle from Bexley Seabury offered a great reflection in our closing gathering on Salvador Dali's art exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts called Disruption and Devotion, and how that speaks to what it means to be an innovator, a redeveloper, a new church planter.
And what it means to inhabit that disruptive space that goes along with emergence and chaotic spaces and so forth. And then a couple of weeks later, what do you find yourself thinking about? So if you were there and you heard all these themes and our interaction and the great food, thank you, Sarah Alphen, and fun that we had, what's staying with you? What you thinking about? What's the earworm that follows you around?
And then finally, what is something you heard experience that you've taken home and shared and you feel would be important to share to this group?
Nice. So I'm going to switch out of, thank you, Steve. I'm going to switch to gallery view so I can see y'all. And if you were there in Boston a week and a half ago, would you just mimic me and wave at the screen so people know? Several of us, not all of us. And man, if you weren't there, we would love to invite you specifically to come to our next gathering. So we're going to have some fun with this. Those of you who are there, start out, if you would, just offer your responses to one of the questions. Tell us which one it is and how you're responding. And then after each one, we'll open up a little space for others to join in and respond as well. Who'd like to start us out?
Deborah, did you raise your hand?
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
dear. Thank you.
So I have kind of little points for many of the questions, but I'll start with what to carry forward into the next gathering. And one of the things I appreciated so much was the creation of a safe and thoughtful space to do the work that we were doing. And that was from worship and singing to having a chaplain for some spiritual direction time to just the approach to the questions.
Beautiful. What do we need to carry forward? Yeah. Anyone else? Please, Alana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alana, and the thing that really has kind of brought me nourishment and a sense of prayerfulness is Anne Steigerwald's reflection about competency and vulnerability. And I am a J on the Myers-Briggs, so I get all into competency. So it was very helpful to hear that, but I did find myself reflecting on it in the last week, just feeling a sense of being called deeper into the practice of spiritual poverty and the life of St. Francis as well. That was part of her talk. So, and how that relates to presence in ministry and being vulnerable.
Beautiful. Please, Kirsten, feel free.
Kirsten.
Kirsten. I get it.
I've been thinking about time and giving oneself enough time, but also responding to urgency, right? That both of these things. I think coming out of the gathering, I thought, okay, there's time. There's not an infinite amount of time, but this takes time, and so we need to respect that. But then after last week, that exploded a little bit, right? And then there are urgent things that have to be taken care of. So how do you keep that undercurrent of respecting the time it takes to build community, to sort of knit that together, but also knowing that there are sometimes things that you have to respond to critically. So that's what I took that time, the time to knit things together away from me. And now I'm thinking to myself, how do you do that and also respond to critical things at the same time?
Thank you. Thank you. Nathan, feel free to unmute when it's your time, when you feel ready.
I would just say that my personal perception has been that this redevelopment work is often to me an out of body experience. And by that, I do mean that that I don't feel as grounded as I might otherwise feel because I'm going in too many directions. I'm trying to do too much. And the experience for me, we did it in Alston a week and a half ago. And it was like those medical environments that are oxygen rich and infused that allow intense healing for those who have wounds like that can't heal readily. And that's what that was like for me. From that tall guy from Chicago who did the music and who didn't do it, who got us to do it, and to the opportunity to have spiritual direction, which I wasn't able to capitalize on, but just the opportunity that it was there, to the way in which we approached things and discussed things and held in confidence things. It was truly powerful, and I think it grounded me, and I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan.
I've been walking with the a lot of the questions raised in the what is post-Christian evangelism discussion and what does that look like? And in my context, it's raised a lot of questions about how much do we center the locus of everything that we're doing on this idea of a worshiping community, and how much resources and energy are we expending on creating a container for that when the Spirit's leading us into out into what's happening out in the community around us, and figuring out how to join with that and still name it as sacred, and be that's our role, is to be out there and in there, and then also figure out a way to be identifying and naming it as sacred, and spending less time just centering that worshiping community, I guess. And so there's a tension and maybe sort of a conflict there, but I think that's the next thing that I'm trying to navigate.
Thank you for naming that. Brian, I'd say that's something I'm taking with me as well, and the way that I set up my day and schedule appointments. I have not been giving myself enough margins between my appointments so that in that moment when it would normally feel really appropriate to linger with what's going on, I'm consistently in a hurry trying to be competent and efficient and end on time so I can start on time. And I've realized that's just my own doing. I need to let that go and say, we only scheduled 30 minutes, but I'd like to linger a little longer because it seems like there's something going on here. And I guess the question is, can I make myself available for that encounter with the Spirit and not so much hide behind competence around time management? Maybe it's more about energy management. I heard that somewhere.
So Sule is here. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm addressing the first question. And what is it I saw as possibility? And surprisingly enough, it was not. I had a conversation with a James Cruz, the seminarian, and this guy inspired me so much. And in that brief moment, during that brief moment, we were talking. And all the time I used to believe that, okay, so if I need to start something, I need to start with the congregation. I need to start with money from the congregation. And he opened my eyes to see how possibilities, how there are other resources, financial resources, and that too, I can tap onto it to start ministries that I would be interested so that I may not be stuck into waiting for the church to have that possibilities. And he told me that the budget of his ministry is more than the budget of the church itself. So because he went out and tapped into on a resources outside of the community, and outside of the church, I mean. And then I said, but James, I don't know, these things takes a lot to, most of the time, nobody has time to write grant and they ask for a lot. And I don't even have the people who are expert in writing grant. And he said, Suli, you know what you can do? How about there are people who know their way in writing grant. So they will agree to take 10% of that, whatever you get, you need to be ready to share it with them. And then they are passionate, as passionate as you are to get that 10% of it. And then you build it into the project, whatever. And then you get the money to do the thing. And after that, he helped me to see how a lot of fundraisers, they fail. And it is because we don't know how to present them, how to present them with the impact that they have. And so therefore we just make announcements and things. We don't say anything about the impact. We don't take time to say, to thank people. And, I left that place inspired by that conversation. And I'm really thinking about fundraisers a different way, even about the stewardship in general. So that's that's the thing I start living out of. So that's kind of management, that's kind of way of going about things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
You're welcome.
Beautiful. All right, and if you were not there, we would welcome your reflections on these questions and how they intersect with your not being there realities, like in your own contexts. Please feel free. Oh, please, Carl. Feel free.
Hi, everyone. So I was there. I'm just been taking time to figure out what I want to say here. I guess following the thread where we stopped, what's next? And I guess I'm thinking also about what Alana mentioned about Anne Steigerwald's opening reflection about how her own competence can become an obstacle. And I guess this is also maybe gesturing toward Eric's question about how to offer help. I think in some ways, I was so glad that Anne began our time together by naming how competence can be an obstacle for her. That's something that really resonated with me. And it made so much space for the many conversations about interdependence that we had. And I kind of want to circle back to say, okay, well, now what do I do with the parts of myself that have been so well trained to seek independence, and that's what makes me good. That's what makes me a good priest. That's what makes me a good man. That's what makes me a good achiever. So I think maybe the sort of cheekily, what's coming to mind is sort of like a support group for recovering pretenders to independence. How do we celebrate the ways that we are failing on purpose to be independent? That feels like spiritual work that I have to do, and I sense that there might have been other people there 2 weeks ago who are on a similar track. I'm looking for companions.
Carl, thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for that invitation. I say yes to you. I want to be a part of that support group for pretenders to independence. It's beautifully said.
May I jump in? I am always curious because I've been in these conversations for a long time around church planting and redevelopment and innovation and the future of the church and our communities. And our Genesis gatherings and even our Zoom gatherings with you all are almost this like sound bath that just help me feel like, wow, what I'm experiencing and seeing and hearing, isn't just a delusion. Like it really is. You all help me connect what I experience with the truth that I think is, revealed to me in Scripture and in the person of Jesus. And I'm also always so aware in these moments of who's not here and how different the conversation would be if more of our, I would say, more of our cardinal rectors and folks that are just doing I don't say that in any kind of derision at all, folks that are doing the best they can to pastor their church within sort of the confines of the institution, were present among us. And I just because I know and I hear that there's many different visions of what the future of the church could look like, and some of them would make me bristle, right? Not because they're bad, but because of my own personal bias. So I think that wondering remains with me. What would it look like to include more of the voices with whom I would hope to be interdependent at these gatherings? And then the other I just want to name, completely different, is that at our last 3 Genesis gatherings, there has been a real openness around offering worship and song and prayerfulness that I have not experienced in hardly any other Episcopal church context. And I don't know if that's the tone that we set, or if you all who led song and worship, you're doing it every week in your congregations, and I just happen to benefit from experiencing it. But it's rare and it's beautiful. and inclusive and just what the church needs. I will stop right there.
One of the
Thank you,
things
Katie.
I think about is the stories we heard. And we were deliberate as we were looking at people who were sending in information about what they were looking for in this event. And you know, in their registrations, we asked some questions, and some of the answers to those questions helped us realize that we probably are not going to be able to get to know each other. Everybody's not going to have the space to know everyone that comes into the room. So how do we help that happen? How do we give people a little bit of a lens into the gifts and the capacity and the stories and the uh, tenacity and the creativity and the full-heartedness of some of the people in this room? So we created space for stories. And I say this, that I think whether we're in a local church context, a new Episcopal community, a Rotary Club meeting, wherever we find ourselves, how do we begin to evoke the stories of the people in the room? And how do we pay attention to the experience and the history and the courageous way that so many people that we don't really know they're how courageous they've been until we listen, and how creative they've been despite obstacles. So there's part of me that wants to continue to evoke stories at these gatherings, but not just these gatherings. How do I help? How do I create and nurture space for my own story and for other people's stories around me?
Yes.
May I say something as a first-time visitor?
We welcome you, David. Please.
Thank you very much. I was just going to keep my mouth shut and listen, but what Katie brought up is exactly why I'm here. We are far from a cardinal parish, but we are a traditional parish in a boom area. People are moving in literally by thousands. And I don't think they're looking for the kind of church we do, which does very well for the people who are there. And some of the folks who come in, we're growing. Is there a model where a church planter is connected with an existing parish? We can share space, we can share ideas, but they are doing church in new ways, but they're not out there all alone trying to do it. And we are learning from them at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
And if so, how would I begin exploring that?
You make an appointment with Katie, who will introduce you to people who are living that model, right?
Yes, absolutely. There
it
are
would
some.
be
I'll put my email in the chat box. Let's connect, David, and anyone else that would be interested in a conversation like that.
it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, David, thank you for speaking up and welcome. Glad you're here. One thing I'm taking home with me is how lovely it was to make room for 10-minute vignettes, you could call them, where people offered what we called with a little bit of a grin, testimonies, where they told a little bit of their story, a little piece of the story that highlights maybe the center of their ministry. And that was so rich for me. I mean, I remember a couple of times saying to myself under my breath, I would never have known. I had no idea that this person brought all of that with them into this gathering. And then the other part was, it would be to our detriment if I did not say out loud that what we got to witness in Charles Milling's leadership around breath and chant and song came to us through Charles following the thread in his own life, that it was so obvious that he had done the soul work to stand up there and present himself just wholly as he is. I was saying to Katie and Steve, there's no fig leaf in any of these people leading our worship and our reflections. They weren't hiding behind anything. There are several examples of that during our time there. But Charles's gift to us was his own remarkable vulnerability, and it really set the tone for what we were doing as a group as well. So yeah, if you can find somebody like a Charles Milling to be with and accompany you and invite you to breath and noticing the spirit, it just changes everything. So those are the two things I'm taking with me, making space for short stories and finding someone to guide us as a group. Yeah. Anyone else?
I wasn't at that conference, but I was intrigued by that Dolly title, Disruption and Devotion. And I've been thinking through this whole conversation about interdependence and destruction. Disruption. I've been thinking about destruction. I think the creative process involves destruction or dismembering in order to make space for whatever is new. And I've been thinking about this whole concept of membership in an organization, which I pastor very part-time, very rural parish. And I'm also a reluctant executive director of a nonprofit I founded. And I look at them through the same eyes now. The church is a nonprofit, but we have members. My nonprofit that I am an executive director for we don't have members. But when you have members, people feel tied to that particular place. And I find that in my small rural town where my church is, there's 4 or 5 small rural churches. And they're also tied to being members to their own place and so afraid of dying that they don't want to work together. Because if I help you, someone in my church may go to your church and then we lose. Like there's no sense of, like, so breaking down this idea of membership, that we're all members of the body of Christ, like that's what really matters. But that's a huge change for them. Like changing those attitudes is the starting place. It's not the ending place. I don't know. I'm thinking about all that stuff, that interdependence, because we really do need each other.
Yeah, yes, Marianne. I love that. And I love your focus on this idea of crossroads for your ministry, this idea that we thought we were on this path and this is our path and I'm identified by this path. But now we come into this space where lots of paths come together. Can we together imagine that there's a new possibility opening up in front of us? I sense that in these kinds of conversations with you all. I sense that some of us are going to spin out of this conversation and have the courage to try on a different path than we've been on. Lord knows we spend a lot of money to get an education that tells us there's a very particular path to success in this SIC code. And then some of us very quickly realize this is not really the path I want to be on. That one is over there. How do I get there? And then there's a crossroad. And so there's something about that, I think, that it's not just a metaphor for me. And I love what you've just named. So maybe as you hear somebody today speaking your language or describing a similar place, I hope that you'll connect. Like Marianne, as you were talking, I was thinking about Sarah Fisher in Portland, Oregon. You're in Rochester, right, Marianne? Yeah. But I heard so many threads in what you said also that I know show up in conversations that I've had with Sarah. And that's one example. Many of you here would do well to connect with who you've heard from each other. So if you're interested, direct message somebody. That's wide open in this platform. Message somebody and say, hey, here's my number or here's my email, let's connect. And that's a big piece of what we're here for. All right, in the few minutes we have left, who else has something you'd like to offer? A sharing that you'd like to offer? Paul, I see you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Welcome.
Friends, I'm so sorry I'm late. I had to be in another meeting. On the top of that, I had to take care of the Vicarage water problem, sudden one. Yeah, for me, I mean, the interconnectivity it gave a message, something like not only interdependence, but also we are doing something in continuity to what has been done in the past by our foreparents. Well, I mean, we know we are learning new skills. I mean, I'm learning new skills, but then we have clouds of witnesses in the past who have done greater things, and some way or other they have done so many things according to the requirement of their time, the demand or the need in what they sensed as the divine need in their community at that time. So I think the work here is, number one, we are not alone. Number two, we have to figure out the need. The needs are changing. As the community is changing around us, the needs are changing. It may not be the same need what our foreparents had. For example, the church that I'm redeveloping is 153 years old. And probably 30, 40 years back, their needs were different. But what we see now is the need is the different. So the skill that I'm kind of taking away from each other is for these present generations and the needs of these generations, how do I address that sensitively? And how do I address that in a way that it can become a calling, invitation for the community to come in, an invitation for us to go out into the community. And that's one thing I for sure I take by seeing so many from different varieties of ministries that you all bring in. And that's the kind of a message I get. Because you are in a different context. I'm in a different context. But we are all in one big mission, one big calling, which will definitely take us through. At the end of the day, as I said, the Lord builds the church. Second thing, briefly, I wanted to say is the Sacred Ground tour was so wonderful. I don't know. I mean, few joined me in my car, and I'm part of Racial Justice and Healing Commission in my diocese. So, I mean, I'm not sure if anybody in my diocese knew that. I'm just coming out of my diocese convention last week, Friday, Saturday. I'm yet to talk about that to my bishops and others. So that also gives us the fact that, I mean, 250 years back, these people came. Of course, they were treated not in a, with the Christian love and whatsoever. That does, make us to still feel regret about it. And but then why do we do all that? Because the Holy Spirit is still at work. Holy Spirit is still at work. We have to forgive ourselves, forgive our people, and move on with that reconciliation. I think part of the church planting is doing that ministry of reconciliation with our community, with our people, of anyone and everyone whom we see demographically in our system, in our region. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This is good. You reminded me that we're always planting seeds in these conversations. We may not see them come up, or we might not even remember that we planted them, and then they come up and we're surprised. But that's a lovely part of what you're describing as well. And it's not just invitation, it's all the prayers and the tears and the longings that precede us in the space we inhabit. So ours are numbered among those as well, and those who follow us will reap the benefits of the prayers and the longings and the tears and the invitations that we've offered each other today. So this is lovely. This is a beautiful gift you've offered each other and to me. In a minute, we're going to close this time. I'm going to stay on in case anyone would like to continue pieces of the conversation. But in the last 2 minutes here, would you mind remembering that this is a public space? If you would like us to join you in prayer and intentions, is there something about which we can pray? If you'd like, just feel free to put that in the chat. And maybe we'll just sit here in silence and watch your prayer requests come across the chat line here. So feel free to just text or type in, how can we pray for you? How can we stay present to you between now and our next gathering? One thing I'd love is please pray for a new Genesis 2 cohort forming in the diocese, the Episcopal Church in Alaska. It's really been inspiring to watch people come together. Pray for the leaders in the Episcopal Diocese of Alaska as we form a new cohort for Genesis 2. As you're doing that, may I invite our spirit trackers to speak right up and tell us how they spotted the spirit in our conversation.
Well, I saw a lot of imagery in the idea of breathing and oxygen and safety, and that we need one another for these things that nourish our work ministry. And in our own broader communities within the church, as well as local communities and in the world, so to speak. I saw the image of the bee that somebody offered, and there were many things, but I'm picking this one out and likening it to the spirit's movement. We don't always know what a bee is going to do. They kind of flit and fly, and so we are following the spirit in our communities. Some things I heard.
Thank you, Teresa. It's beautiful.
And I noted some words that came up, or synonyms for these words that came up repeatedly through our conversation. So I think I have 8 words: balance, tension, energy, risk, companions, vulnerability, stories, and space.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Teresa. And thanks to each of you. You're amazing. This is really beautiful to be here with you today. You fill my heart up, our hearts up. Thanks to my colleagues, Steve Matthews and Katie Rengers and Sarah Alphin for co-hosting today's session. Thanks to each of you who joined us and for the spirit that you brought with you. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Peace, y'all.
Everybody.